This is Jason coming to you from the Hoosier State. And I have to do these now. Not I have to, but I enjoy, there's the word there, enjoy doing these live streams on the way into work. So I got some time as I'm sitting here in the dark of old Indiana, the land of the Indians, which I don't think I've ever seen Indian in Indiana my entire life. So there's that. That makes the state name awkward. But yeah, I had an observation, I guess. I think a lot of people that are paying attention might have similar situations that they're experiencing at their local hometowns, cities, villages, wherever you might say, wherever you live, that people are coming out in mass to vote in this year's election. I was in utter shock yesterday. Here in Indiana, I believe on Monday, if I'm not mistaken, they opened up early voting in Indiana. It might have even been a couple of days before that, but there's only centralized locations. But I think on Monday, they made it where it could be in your local communities and their designated spots that you can vote. And then obviously those are the spots that will be available up to the 5th of November. So I live in a small town, and I've never, maybe I have seen this before, but maybe not as early as I guess in the past, like on election day. I've always voted on election day. I've never voted before the election. I don't know why. I just feel like that's been a tradition, at least for me. I don't want to say, in general, because, I can only speak to my own personal situation. But I've always just, on election day, go and vote. And usually it's never been, in my experience, overtly that long and tedious an experience. I usually go first thing in the morning, and because I'm a working Joe, so I don't have the luxury of trying to hustle off after work to get down and hopefully get in line and all that. So I usually go first thing in the morning and roll the dice and get in and get out. And the last couple of elections, I'm sure there's a lot of us experienced. If you do vote on election day, there's some waiting, and again, where you live obviously dictates a lot of this. And if there's multiple locations to vote, that obviously helps as well, I'm sure, to alleviate some of the standing in line situation and all that jazz. But like I said, the last couple of elections, I voted on the election day, and there was, I would have to wait in line. But again, being election day, I was prepared to wait in line for, I guess, however long it's supposed to take. And, I felt like I would get in and out pretty quickly within the hour, I guess. And again, that's good for some people. I've heard people have to be in line for hours and hours on end, which is, to me, it seems like nuts. I'm sure if you live in a major city, that's very possible, and I'm grateful that that's not my situation. However, I live in, hey, what's going on? I won't be telling anybody who I'm voting for, that's for sure. I don't want to cause a meltdown, in Indiana here. And I appreciate the question, Lewis. Definitely appreciate the question. But so on Monday I drove by, in my area, there's a local library that is the closest to me. And again, I don't know how it is in everybody's state and everybody's area. It used to be you have to go to a specific voting area in your town, city, village, metropolitan, or whatever, and you had to go to that one that you lived in. Now, at least in Indiana, you just have to have your ID that you live in that county or that town. I think it might just be and that's it essentially, and then you can go. But luckily for me, there's a library that's a hop, skip, and a jump from where I live. So Monday I drove by on my way to go get some coffee, and there was already a line out the door and wrapped around the building. And this is, what, 9 days before the election at that point? And I was like in shock. And I was like, that many people are already voting 9 days before the election? Like, that's crazy. And the line never stopped. And I would drive by because my son plays high school sports, and I come and go, obviously grab a bite to eat for lunch throughout the day, blah, blah, because I work from home multiple times a week. And that line never stopped. I was like I said, in shock. I was like, wow. And I was wondering if this is the way it is in other parts of the United States. And I've been hearing that it is indeed, maybe not, I don't know, like a lot of people in line, I'm not for sure about that, but there is a huge turnout already for voting. And so then yesterday, I go by, I'm taking my son to school, and I drive by the library again, and the line is already wrapped around the building again. And this is now a week before, so I guess I should say 8 days before was Monday. Yesterday was 7 days before, if I'm not mistaken. So I went to yesterday, 10 a.m., 9 something, they're supposed to start voting. You can start voting at the library at 10 a.m., I believe. I think it goes 10 to 6, I think, prior to the election, and then it's like 6 to 6 on election day, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong about that, but I think that's, again, this is in Indiana, or at least in my area. But all this signage is very easily accessible. You can go online, you can look in the paper, you can go on their Facebook, and there are all the different kinds of apps or whatever, and it's clearly explained where to go, how to vote, what you need, what the time limits are, time frame, and all that. So I can't speak to other places, but at least in my area, you would have to be, like have your head in the sand not to know how to do it or where to do it and all the ins and outs. So yesterday I go by, like I said, grabbing like a cup of coffee or whatever, and I see it's happening again. Like it's already like a line out the side of the building, and yesterday it looked like it was even longer, the line, prior to it opening. Then I had to go do something in the middle of the day. I had to go do some running around. I'm going this way on. Now I'm going by the library on purpose because I don't always have to go that direction, of course. And it's still there. The line, like 4 hours later, the line is still around the building. And this isn't small town Indiana, people. This is not like I live in Indianapolis or Chicago or Detroit or some major city where there's tens of thousands of people, which you'd expect when you expect that, those bigger cities. This is like legitly small town Indiana. And I still in shock. So then I thought, okay, I get off of work, early afternoon. I'll run over there between the lunch and people getting off of work. People get off of work between, I'm sure, 5-ish and later. So there's a couple hour in between where I'm thinking, oh, the line will be kind of dead. It'll be down. I can run in there and run in there and vote real quick and be done. Nope. That was not accurate at all. So I go, and now I'm in line, standing in line, and I have to wait almost exactly an hour to get in to vote. So when I get there, it's about halfway around the side of the building, and there are so many people again in front of me, and then the people, of course, come in behind me, and you're just waiting. And I have to say, I am very impressed with the way they handled it. I know so many people I've seen on news outlets and social media and all that talk about the horrors of voting and how terrible experience it was and how everybody's out to get you and all this kind of stuff. And I mean, again, not to discredit any of that experience possibly for those people, but I had a wonderful experience. It was ran very well. It felt like they had it down to a science. The only inconvenience, which is nothing they can control, is the length of time and the amount of people in line. I voted. Sorry, since I'm driving, I gotta be careful. I voted Okay. Hey, however you vote, I mean, it's so important to vote, and I'm going to get into that here in a second. I think that's great, Lewis. So I thought they did a great job at my location. They had, like I said, down. I didn't feel like there was much of a hiccup at all. And no hiccups, actually. Everybody was super pleasant. Like I said, I was there towards the end of the day, and I'm sure a lot of those poll workers are probably over it at that point. But they were great. They were really friendly. I had like a baseball t-shirt on and a baseball hat. And they were like, joking about my teams, because again, I'm from Indiana, but I had a Boston Red Sox shirt and then a Pittsburgh Pirates hat, just because I'm a baseball fan. And so, yeah, and of course I know that doesn't match, but they were having a good old time with that. So, I'm like laughing and having a good time with the poll workers. Everybody's super pleasant, talking about just like, little lighthearted topics. It was just very nice. I felt very just appreciative of just the overall spirit in the place, because I know it could be a high stressful situation, and everybody's, especially this year, I think everybody's very, emotional about things, and very just looking for something to go wrong, or looking for something to complain about, or looking for something to be up in arms about or whatnot. And so I appreciate it at our location. Everyone tried to be as respectful and kind and appreciative as possible. So I go in, I do my voting, and they weren't in the past. And again, it is what it is. I didn't think much about it at the time, but now I'm a little bit more leery. Again, talking about kind of being more, a little bit more leery about stuff. They would sometimes, I feel like sometimes the poll workers would kind of like linger behind you as you're trying to do your voting, and I never was a big fan of that. I never really said much, because I'm like, I know I'm the one in control of this, and I know I'm going to be the one who puts it in the ballot box and all that. Well, this time, yesterday, again, they were just like, they go, if you need help, I'll show you what you need to do to like load your ticket in the machine, make your selections and all that. If you don't need anything, just go right on over there and go ahead and start, which was great. No one lingered. No one was like hovering around me. No one was coming and keep asking me if I needed help or anything like that. They treated me, and as I could tell from everybody else, like adults, which was nice. I made it this far in life. I feel like I can, handle inserting a ticket into a voting machine and picking my selections and then having it print off. I did double check my ballot to make sure everything was on the up and up, make sure there was no mistakes. And then they give you an envelope. I put it in an envelope, and they give you a little table to go to, and everybody after that, you get, you put everything together in the envelope, and then you sign and date it, and then they help you make sure you glue it, the ballot together, the envelope. And then there's a gentleman that's there, like this little old grandfather, which seemed very sweet, older gentleman, and he's making sure he gets a signature on there. I guess he's an election official. And he had to sign all the outsides of the envelope to say it came, from their location, and that everything's on the up and up, and then you put it in the ballot box. Now, everything went smashingly, no shenanigans, and I could tell what's going on, and that was great. But the crazy thing is, like I was saying before, this was something I had heard from the day before, was that I got there, like I said, after lunchtime, before dinner, before everybody got off of work, around 4-ish, I would say. And when I was there, that ballot box, because there's only one for the entire site, I guess, it was already almost full. And I was there there was like 2 or 3 more hours to go for the rest of the evening before they would close up for the day. And I had heard that the day before, they ended up having to stop the election early because the box was already full. You could not get any more ballots inside the box, which just, to me, it sounds so crazy. And they wanted to make sure everybody got their votes in, but the ballot box was so full that you could no longer get it inside in the box. And so, they had to close up early, because I guess every site only is allowed one. I don't know. I'm sure there's reasons behind it, and probably to try to cut down on any kind of shenanigans, which is great. But yesterday, when I was there, and like I said, I got there around 4, and I think there was at least another 2 hours into, I think they go till 6. It was already getting full when I was there. So, I mean, again, that's just crazy to think like that many people in the town I live in, which is not a very big town, and I say town in quotes because I don't live in a big area whatsoever, had that many, and this is just my location. On top of that, guys, this is not like this is a major city or there's only one location in the town. I think there's at least 3, if not 4 places in the town I live in that you can vote. So I could be wrong about that, but I think it could be at least that many. And it was the box was already that full. So I've heard in a lot of states, and I know they're focused on the main 7-ish states, 7 and 9 states, I think, in America, that are going to be the swing states for this election. So all the other states were just kind of just doing our part to do, obviously to vote, but also to vote for local elections and state elections and school board members and all that stuff. Because that's important also, because a lot of times there's like nonpartisan, or I think it's not bipartisan, or nonpartisan. I think it's nonpartisan. You need to make sure you're up on that stuff for like school board members. Kind of makes a difference too. Also, a lot of people, I don't know how it is in other states, but in Indiana, if you pick a straight ticket, you only can vote for the people that are on that ticket. So if you're voting Democrat or you're voting Republican or Independent or whatever, if you hit straight ticket, that means any other election that you can vote for, any other office, doesn't get your vote if they're not on a ticket for a Republican, Democrat, Independent, or whatever, Libertarian. And so you need to make sure if you're not aware of that, and maybe your state's different, you need to make sure that you're doing that, because that's very important. Because if it's a judgeship or whatever, if it's school board members, if it's a certain kind of maybe clerk's office or surveyor or whatever it may be, that maybe in your local area there's not a party affiliation, you cannot vote for that person if you do not vote for everybody. Individually at each screen, if you vote a straight party ticket, those people don't get your vote. So a lot of people don't know that. Again, maybe this is an Indiana thing only, I'm not for sure. But I know in Indiana, that's a thing. So make sure I don't ever vote straight party, not that I would anyways, because I vote for who I think is going to do best in the position, especially at the local level, that's for sure. I definitely go through and meticulously pick the individuals as you see fit. So that's a little hack, maybe, if you weren't aware, to make sure you're doing that, because a lot of people don't realize that, and they miss out on something that's important, especially if you have the school system and all that, to make sure you're voting for the local school board members. I know that's probably the most important one. I think that's the one that a lot of people aren't aware of because they're nonpartisan, or they're supposed to be. But I think Lenny mentioned a thing which I kind of agree, or I'm sorry, not Lenny, Lewis, sorry, said something I liked also about voting. Like I lived in Asia off and on for 12 years, and I've always been very in those elections, at least in Asia where I was at, you're not voting a lot of times for the people in power. You're voting for local people to vote those people into office, and they vote for, let's say, the prime minister. So you're not voting for the prime minister, let's say in Japan. You're voting for the people who you want them to vote, hopefully, on somebody to put in that position. So it's very important, at least in America, that you can vote from the very top all the way down to the very bottom or the lowest, elected official level. Like I said, school board member is a good example of that. Not that it's a low position, but it's just like that as far as the from president to school board member is a gap, let's say. So when I lived in Asia, I remember thinking that, how important it is to vote, because, you don't get a lot of time, you don't have no choice in the people in power in Asia. You don't have any say in that matter, which is kind of disappointing, but again, that's the way they do things. I'm not here to change that. I'm not here to say it's right or wrong. I'm just saying, there's a difference, and it's something that you have to be aware of. So I do appreciate the fact that we have the opportunity to do so. And it was interesting because I was talking to my mother yesterday on the phone, and I asked her if I told her I was out voting, and she was like, "Oh, that's so good. I know that's important to you. You've always been someone who, stays on top of those things." And I was like, "Yes, ma'am." And I remember her and I were talking about when I was younger, and then she said that she doesn't think she'll be able to vote this year because of her health, which is unfortunate. And I told her if I lived close, I would take her. And we were having a good talk about that. But she said that, in my family, and I wasn't aware of this, but it's just like my mom's always been this. My mom's one of those like genealogists, like always big about your genealogy and where you come from and who we are as a family and our ancestors and all that jazz. And she's like, we come from a long line of people who take their civic duty very important and to vote, and voting's very important in our family. And I was like, well, yeah, I think it is important, and I definitely appreciate that, because I know a lot of countries don't have that luxury at all, or again, if you can, it's not at the same level that we have here. So it is a thing I think is important. And like I was saying just to Lewis a moment ago, regardless of who you vote for, I just think it's so important to vote. I might not agree with your voting, the way you vote, and that's fine. It doesn't matter. But I always say, and I'm sure everyone's heard this before, is like, if you don't vote, then you can't complain. You can't talk about how bad something is because you didn't even attempt to try to let your voice be heard. I know people's like it's rigged and all this kind of stuff, and I don't know. I don't want to believe that, and maybe that's just me being naive and foolish. I hope not. I hope that we have everything's on the up and up this year. So let's hope for that. Fingers crossed. But yeah, that was kind of an experience I had yesterday. I thought I'd share that because it's, again, Indiana's not a state that's going to surprise anybody on where they're voting for at least president, I'm sure, because it's a pretty conservative state in general. But just the amount of enthusiasm, I guess, is the right terminology there, the right word, enthusiasm, to get out and vote. And then, a lot of people get caught up in the electoral college versus the popular vote. But, again, the popular vote can make a difference if the person who gets the popular vote and the electoral college both get the same outcome as president. Then that's a little bit of a mandate that I think a lot of people forget about. So that's something also to look into, and that's where it gets into everybody should be voting, because it goes towards the popular vote. But yeah, I think it's something, we're just surprised about. Again, Indiana, a state that's not going to make a difference as far as the presidential election, because it's already, going to vote a conservative outcome for that. That's just the way it is. But you can make a huge difference at the local levels, and the senators, governors, judges, school board members, like I mentioned. These are things that you actually can impact, an immediate impact. And then they had questions on there yesterday about if you should retain a certain judge, and they had questions about the state of Indiana's, I think, constitution, if we wanted to amend something. And so, there's a lot more to it than just the president. So it's important to go out there, I think, and do that. And when I lived in Asia, I didn't have any say-so in the matter because I couldn't vote, because I wasn't a citizen of Japan while I was there, or any other Asian country I lived in. I lived in Asia, like I said, for 12 years, and I lived in 3 different countries. I spent my majority of time in Japan, but I also lived in South Korea, and I lived in China. So, there was definitely an opportunity to see the process. Like in the Koreans, the South Koreans, man, they are very passionate about their politics or about their leadership. And I saw lots of protests when I was living in Korea, and people out there on their bullhorns. Like, most of them were college students, I would say. Probably most were college-age students. But I remember one time I was with my friend, and he goes, and I'm like seeing like this big, what I thought at first was just like a big get together, like it was like kind of like I don't want to say party, but it was like a soiree of sorts. I was like, oh hey, and I was telling my friend who's a Korean national, I was staying with him for this extended summer break, and I was like, hey, let's go over there and take a look at that. He's like, oh no, Jason, let's not go over there. He goes, they're protesting. And if you go over there, they're protesting, I think, the Iraq war at the time. They're like, you really don't want to go over there. They're going to associate you with America, and it may not be a good experience. They're going to be getting all over you about stuff. And I was like, oh. And I remember thinking like, oh, okay. And he was right, because some of the protesters saw me, and they were not looking too happy that I was in their vicinity. So I was like, all right, maybe it's time for us to make a tree and leave. And he was like, yeah, that's probably a good idea. So yeah, they're very passionate over there. And then I was there during one year where during the Iraq War, there was a Korean national soldier, I believe, or maybe it was a journalist. Now that I think about it, it was a journalist who was captured by I think it was Al-Qaeda, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong. And they killed him. They filmed themselves killing him, and of course, absolutely, it was a horrible thing. And they filmed it, and they of course sent it around the world, showing what'll happen if they catch you or whatnot. And it was just an awful experience. And there's a lot of resentment towards America during that time, because they felt like it was America's fault that Korea was involved in this, quote unquote peacekeeping operation and with Allied forces. And so they were really upset about Americans, and they felt like America was the reason why their soldiers and their media that were over there were getting themselves hurt. And I remember there was this thing about, I guess, this journalist who had lost his life, unfortunately. His favorite dish was a black noodle dish, some sort of maybe Chinese noodle dish, or maybe it was Korean. I can't remember. I think I want to say it was a black noodle dish of some sort. And for a couple weeks, everybody was going to these restaurants that were ordering that specific dish because that was his favorite dish, just to try to as a memory of him. And so yeah, I can understand why my presence wasn't really wanted in some of these situations. Of course, I wouldn't have known that. I don't speak Korean not at all. I know a few words and phrases, but not at all would I say I can speak any level of Korean. And so my buddy was like, it's probably best that we're not going over there because we're not obviously happy. So I was like, yeah, it's probably for the best. I probably won't go. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's right. You're right. That's exactly it. Black bean noodle. Yes, that is it. Yeah, I mean, I appreciate it. I'm doing well, George. So after that experience, I was a lot more careful about not putting myself in situations where you could be, just situations where, let's say, passions might be heightened. I totally understand where they were coming from. I completely understand how they felt. One of their own people who obviously innocent, there was an innocent news journalist was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and it was terrible. I totally understand where they're coming from, and I would not want to add insult to injury by my presence coming to these protests. So I just, whoa, that's. There you go. Well, there's that. Sorry, it probably felt like an earthquake, but I must have hit a little bump in the road and caused my phone to fall off. Sorry about that, guys. But I was just saying, I don't want to cause any disrespect to anyone, and probably removing myself from the situation was for the best. And so I did. But yeah, I mean, like I said, so with all that being said, it was just that, you have to be respectful of other countries and what they're going through. I'm not here to tell anybody, obviously, how they should do their lives, their politics, their voting, or anything like that. But just getting to see it from other perspectives. Because most Americans, let's be honest, we could barely be bothered with our day-to-day activities. If our Amazon package doesn't get here on time, that's a true burden for us. If our McDonald's doesn't get to us in a quick manner, if I'm waiting more than a minute or two for my McDonald's drive-through, we're super inconvenienced. So I have to just, it's important to not get too bent out of shape about how other people handle their business. And so, it's just, trying to be respectful of people's situations, their time, what they're going through. And not that I'm going to come across as the great white hope to anybody. I want to be respectful of their situations. Just like I was talking about at the beginning of this conversation, of just being like, hey, I'm not here to tell anybody how to vote or who's right or who's wrong. It's just important to go out there and just do your duty, I think, as an American. And so it's important, and I hope that cooler heads will prevail when it's all said and done. I think there's a lot of worry and animosity and concern this go around, like there has been. I think this one's maybe a little bit more heightened with some of the rhetoric on both sides. So I'm hoping that once it's all said and done and the final votes tallied, that we can move forward together as a nation and what's best for us as a people, and hopefully we start the healing process, and nothing gets too worked up and causes an unnecessary harm or uncomfortableness, I guess, or just mean-spirited and hate and anger, and just we can kind of be in a more of a proper mindset for everybody's sake. So we'll see. Oh yeah, man, for sure, George. I mean, you obviously know better than me because you're there. I was only there on 3 different occasions for, probably about a year total if you took all 3 times and put it together, like a little over half a year. Yeah, I mean, but you're unfortunately as a guest in that country, right? You can speak to this more than I can. I don't feel at all comfortable saying like, well, this is the way it should be. And I'm not saying this about you at all. I'm talking about me personally. Like, I would never say like, well, this is the way it should be, or this is the way it shouldn't be, and you should do it this way, or you should do it that way. Well, this is how we do it in America. Like, we have it all figured out. Like, I always want to be very mindful and careful that I do not do those type of things, or have those kind of conversations, because I wouldn't want that, quite frankly, to be done to me from somebody else from another country who doesn't live here, or they're here but they're not American citizens. It's like, well, you know what? I don't really care what you think, Oh, here comes the police. All right. So I want to also be respectful of that myself, because I don't want somebody telling me those things. So it definitely is problematic. It's like a catch-22. Obviously, you want what's best. You want the best possible outcome for you and your family. And when you're in another country where you have no control over some of the outcomes of certain things, it definitely some can be frustrating, or it could be maybe uncomfortable at times because you don't have a lot to say in the matter. But yeah, I think it's definitely something that I struggle with. But at the end of the day, I don't want somebody come and tell me how I should live my life. It's like somebody coming into your house and saying like, you know what, your house sucks, man. It's like, I'm not a big fan of that. So I was like, yeah, I don't know if I'm going to be on board with that statement. So yeah, it's a slippery slope. So for sure. But yeah, I think it's something that we all have to just be mindful of, without a doubt. Oh my goodness. So yeah, I think I'm gonna stop here for a second. I got some extra time. I'll take a look here. What's up, Ray? All right, message retracted. I see a lot of stuff I don't agree with here in Korea, but yeah, we already talked about that. I feel like humans have a responsibility of holding each other accountable and love one another. It always. I agree with you, Red. That's a really good point. Yep. That's a good point. And I think so too. I mean, I've been, like I said, in Asia. I've seen the good and bad there. I've seen, obviously, in America here, I've seen a lot of bad. I've seen good too. Of course, I see good. And I just feel like a lot of times I want to, and I think, we are our human innate nature, I think a lot of times is that we want to do good, but we can't get out of our own ways. And that's the problem, is that we are We are broken people who have plenty of problems and fallacies, and we come up short so much all the time. So it's very difficult. And sometimes we can't get out of our own way. And I think that's where the problem begins, is that we can't get out of our own way, and it's just very frustrating. And we don't show a lot of grace to one another, especially nowadays. I mean, again, I grew up in the 80s and 90s. I just felt like people were just way more tolerant of each other. People were way more showing grace and way more respectful. But I feel like nowadays, and definitely in the last 10, 15 years, everybody's wick is just so much shorter. Everybody's looking to be offended. Everybody's looking to think that everybody's out to get them or get their families. And it seems like it's just so much more heightened emotional feelings. People don't think through things rationally anymore. Everything's about them. I know in America, and it makes me crazy. It makes me nuts when I hear people say, well, this is my truth. Well, just because that might be your truth doesn't mean it is the truth or anything factual. And I hear that statement all the time, and it just makes me want to bang my head against the wall. I'm just like, oh my gosh, when I hear stuff like that. And it's mostly young people saying those things. But I mean, I've heard older people even older than I am, say things like that because it's their way of trying to discredit reality. So, it's nuts. He asked me what I thought about a religious-backed political rally he was in the last week, and I just said I don't really think about it so far, one way or the other. All right. Yeah, I mean, I have a coworker that asked me about political and religious stuff one week. I just said, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think especially when you're at work, George, I mean, for sure. I think when you're at work, that's always a slippery slope. I mean, most definitely. I think it's most dangerous, at least here in America, to discuss politics and religion. I mean, that's the thing that you get told, at least when I grew up, that's the one thing you always, my dad would tell me on a regular basis. I love my father. He passed away this past year. And the one thing he said to me on a regular basis when I was a kid was just two things, Jason, you always want to stay away from talking about is religion and politics. And I think most Americans have heard that in some capacity, either from a parent or from a boss or a coworker or family member or something. So this is probably not news to most of us. But yeah, it's always very leery. And, I think no matter what your job is, you have to be very careful about that. You might be able to talk to certain people about certain things if you get to know them on a personal level. Okay, maybe. Again, I think it's very mindful. I mean, myself personally, I'm very careful about how I present myself in those type of topics to people, even people I feel like I can probably talk with in a more free manner. Just because you have to work with these people for the rest of your life, maybe. And I just don't want to be in a situation where people, they perceive something that's not accurate, but they have their perception, and perception is reality. And then you're now stuck in this perception of something just because they heard you say something or they told you or you told them or whatever, and they paint you into a corner. So it's very dangerous. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, sure. Outside of work, I always tell people, I think it's pretty funny. I'm like, if you really want to know what I think about a certain topic, then ask me at 3:31 when I clock out. Then I'll tell you. But I'm like, while I'm on the clock, I'm like, nope, I'm good on that. Yeah, that's 100% true, Ray. I mean, people are way too thin-skinned. People get butthurt too easy now. Again, this is, I think, a modern day problem. I mean, when I was a kid growing up in the 80s and 90s, no matter how old the person was, like, people just felt like they just had like a much thicker skin. No one took everything's personal. And now I feel like everybody takes everything so personal. Either it's false or fake outrage, or it's true outrage. I mean, who knows? But I feel like now we give people an allowance to act that way, and we give them the pass to feel a certain way and act a certain way, which is ridiculous. And I run into that a lot in with my current job that I've been at for years. Is that I work in a situation where people just act outrage for outrage's sake. And of course, it's ridiculous, but I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel. So it's just like, all right, like what I was mentioning a moment ago to George, that's when I just don't talk about certain topics because it's not worth the fallout. It's not worth the hassle. It's not worth the hurtedness or whatever. It just is like, I'm good on that, man. Like I'm good on all that. I'm not gonna get caught up in all that for sure. That is very true, George. I agree with you 100%. And I used to teach in Japan, and I know you mentioned that you're in Korea, but you may have a similar scenario or situation. But when I lived in Japan, I would be in the teacher's room a lot. I was a teacher for years in Kyushu, in Fukuoka, and people would ask me topics all the time because that was when Obama was in office and the Gulf War still going on in Iraq and in Afghanistan and all that. And people would be asking me about politics all the time when I lived in Japan. And they always asked me about if I was a Christian or not, because they just perceive that if you're a Westerner, if you're an American, that you're a Christian. And they'd always ask me all these questions all the time, like nonstop. And I always had to like navigate those waters very carefully because, again, now that I'm ashamed of where I'm from or who I am or how I view the world through my lens, I still have to work with these people. I still have to be respectful. I don't want people to disrespect me. I don't want people to, like I said, paint me into a certain situation that's not actually accurate. And I want my work experience to be a good one. So it's always like navigating those choppy waters sometimes could be an art form. Like you said, I agree. I was just in Fukuoka a month ago for a weekend. Yeah, Fukuoka is amazing. It's one of those like places where, I could just talk about Fukuoka all day long. I gotta be careful because I have to go to work in a sec. But yeah, Fukuoka is amazing. I highly recommend anybody who has any interest in traveling abroad, traveling to Asia, traveling to Japan. Everybody thinks Tokyo. Everybody thinks maybe Kyoto. They think about those places, which is all fine and great. Osaka, maybe. But Fukuoka, man, for my money's worth, that's the place to go. Like when I lived in Korea, I was in Suwon, and I loved Suwon. I thought it was great. I was in Wonju. Those areas were great. I love those areas. Everybody thinks Seoul, and of course Seoul's great. I love Seoul. Beautiful city, super modern city with all the amenities you could ever want. But I loved Suwon. I loved Wonju. I was in this really small little town called Jungsun also, but it was like out in the middle of the mountains somewhere. So I was like way off the beaten path. That was a little bit, maybe a little too rural for me. But Suwon and Wonju, which is where I really was spending most of my time, was great. And I really love that area. And the food was fantastic. The people were great. Sometimes the people, like I was telling you, could be a little bit spicy sometimes. But yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, okay, then you definitely know. Then you get it. So yeah, that's fine. Yeah, Wonju was great. I think I told you this before. I remember when I was in Wonju, there's like an arcade. There's of course like 18 years ago at this point. But there's like an arcade there in the city I went to, and it's like a sit down, and you can sit across from someone else and play a video game. And I would have this, and when they saw a white guy inside the this arcade, every single young middle school, high school age boy would get in line to take me on in these video games, and they would like kick my ass. And I was like having to spend so much money in these machines to try to fight them in these fighting games. And oh my gosh, it was nuts. I remember I feel like I spent like $20 that day in these freaking games, these machines, because everybody and their grandmother was wanting to play against me, and they just want to beat the white guy at like Tekken or whatever the game was, or Final Fight or whatever it might have been. And I was like, that day I lost a lot of money in those machines. Yeah, that's where they used it. Oh, wow. Okay, that makes sense. Because, yeah, it was out there in the middle of nowhere. So, for sure. Yeah, dude. Most definitely. Yeah, I'll have to reach out to you. Send me an email if you don't mind. My email's on my YouTube information section or whatever. Shoot me an email, and maybe we can go live one of these days, and we can just talk shop. That'd be great. That'd be awesome. I would love to do that. So yeah, man, I'll let you go, dude. I'll hop off of here, but it was good talking to everybody. I know the topics were kind of all over the place, but hopefully it was somewhat informative. If not, then maybe next time. But until then, peace.